All right, Sterling Hawkins, welcome to the show.
Brett, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I gotta say, I've always been a big fan of your work. I've also always been a big fan of your name. Great name,
I,
Sterling
I wish I could
Hawkins.
take any credit for that. It's all my mom. But thank you.
I think when I first heard your name, Sterling Hawkins, I envisioned just a large, majestic bird just soaring through the sky. Like that's what came to mind.
I'll take it. Sounds like a good spirit animal, maybe. And you know what's funny? Like, I love my name now, especially doing what I do, but it's not quite as cool when you're 12, 13, 14 years old growing up in central New York. And I've had to pay my dues with it too. So,
you know, it's funny. We've got two kids, and it's kind of it's something that you think about a lot as a parent. Is like, well, we want to give him like a cool, unique name, but we don't want to make it so unique that he gets made fun of. But I think that the kind of the cooler, unique names where the parents take a little bit of a risk, that the kid almost has to live into that name. So I think it almost kind of maybe pushed you towards taking the chances and living the life you did in maybe a small way.
yeah, I would agree to that. And, it helped me work through some difficult times earlier in my life. I think it's definitely served me in the long term. And who knows, maybe if I have another kid, I'll also name him Sterling. We'll see how it works out for him.
There it is. There it is. So you have a quote that I kind of want to touch on as we get started here, and it's
Hmm.
the way out is through, and the way
Yeah.
through is trust. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I believe that everything that we're looking for, personally and professionally, call it the money, the business growth, number of employees we're looking to bring on board, the number of locations, but also joy and happiness is on the other side of the things that hold us back. Discomfort in the form of fear, anger, grief, some of those uncomfortable feelings. And I believe we've got to go through those things, and all the results we're looking for are on the other side. And the reason that it's not easier to go through some of those things, the reason we aren't just naturally more persistent to work through some of that resistance is that we have a profound lack of trust that some of those things are actually possible for us. And so, when I say the way out is through, it means we've got to go through the fear, the resistance, the pain, whatever it is. And we do that by cultivating this trust that it's worth it doing so. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's 100% true. And that's actually something I've touched on the show before. I think I was
Mhm.
speaking with Evan Carmichael a couple weeks ago, and we were kind of talking about,
Oh, yeah.
why certain people actually take action towards their goals and they keep going, and why others don't. And I think that we kind of came to an agreement that a big part of it is just self belief, is trust that this hard work that they're going to do, these hard things that they're going to have to go through, are actually going to be worth it because there's something greater on the other side. And
Yeah.
I guess then the second part of that question is, how do we build that trust within ourselves that these hard things that we're going to do are actually going to be worth it?
Yeah. Well, we live in a world where the things externally aren't all that trustworthy. We've got fake news and AI generating videos. It's almost like everything
Right.
that I see, especially online these days, I've got to have that critical mind filter in the back of my head of like, is this real or did AI make this? And I think what there is to trust in this time when everything externally is really untrustworthy to some extent is finding that trust in ourselves. And maybe a better way to say it is not finding that trust, but remembering it. I think it's always there, has always been with us, but we start to adopt some of these limiting beliefs and limiting perspectives that hold us back and cause us to question ourselves. Like, hey, well, maybe I'm not right, or there's an expert, and so I'm constantly questioning myself with all the information that we have in the world. And so to start to remember that trust, to reconnect with the trust that's inside of ourselves, we've got to step beyond how we've known ourselves to be. Or said more simply, we've got to step outside of our comfort zone and open our mind to new ideas, new perspectives in that space, and soften our heart to some of the uncomfortable feelings that might live there so we can let them pass through us and step into this greater trust of, hey, my perspective is important. And I might not always be right, but I believe in my ability to get to the right answer sooner or later.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I totally agree. I think that's a great way of saying it. It's just, remembering that trust, right? Because we're born with that trust, and somewhere along the line, something happens that kind of rattles that trust. Like I look at my son; he's 2 years old,
Mm,
and he'll run up to any group of people with full confidence, and he just expects them to accept him for everything he is. I mean, he'll see a group of kids,
beautiful.
and he'll just point at him, and he'll go friends, and he'll just run right in there, and I'm like, wow, it would be amazing if we could all do that as adults and just be ourselves and just expect other people to accept us. But somewhere along the line that gets shaken, whether it's elementary school, high school. And yeah, I think that's a pretty cool way of putting it, is we need to remember that trust, not necessarily find it or even build it. It's there already. We just need to remember it.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting? I was just writing a blog about this morning, but human beings only come out of the womb with two fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. So those are the only two things that are kind of innate within us that we're essentially born with. What that means is that every other fear, the fear of failure, the fear of difficult conversations, the fear of public speaking, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of being embraced by, that group of kids that's across the playground, whatever it is,
Right.
it started somewhere. Like there was a specific moment at a specific time where you said, that's no longer safe, or I need to be scared of these things. And what's really powerful about that is if it started somewhere, if it's not innate within you, it can end somewhere. And that's really what I've built a lot of my career, my perspective on.
Curious with yourself and your own journey. Have you ever had, periods within your life where maybe you struggled to remember that trust and struggle to do the hard things in front of you that you should be doing?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the poster child for that sometimes. Like all the time, continually, and still. And I think building trust isn't something like that's black and white. Like you have it or you don't have it. It's a constant practice. And some days I show up a little bit stronger with it, and some days a little bit weaker. But I think probably my rock bottom moment of lack of trust came after I went through this multi-billion-dollar company failure and like totally bottomed out in all the ways. The company was bankrupt, $500 million of other people's money gone. Um, I'm in all sorts of personal debt. I go from the penthouse in San Francisco, like living the dream life of an entrepreneur, to my parents' house, which is super humbling after living a scene on the Wolf of Wall Street for a while.
Sure.
And even my girlfriend broke up with me. It was like one thing after another. And there were so many losses that were so close together. I just lost the trust that anything greater was possible. You know what it felt like, Brent? And maybe you felt like this before. I'm sure many people have, but it felt like I had my shot. It felt like I was given everything. We had all the money, all the patents, all the smartest people. We're like this gleaming beacon of a startup in Silicon Valley, and we failed. I blew it. And it was really confronting the depths of that I started to turn it around, where I said, you know what? If I'm going to stay here, it's only worth my staying if I start to believe I have another shot. It's only worth me being here if I can put one foot in front of the other and keep going. And the way that I'm going to do that, I know it much more intellectually now, and I teach people in companies all over the world, but I'm going to create a system for myself to get out of my own comfort zone and these things that I've been avoiding, denying, and surviving, which in a large part I would say now contributed to that rock bottom moment. I'm now going to go after. And by going after those things, it was my way of at least starting to build some of that trust back into myself.
And I think a lot of people listening or have probably been, or maybe they are currently in a similar situation. Probably not exactly like yours. Most people haven't run companies with 700 employees, but they've hit rock bottom. We've all hit rock bottom in our own way, where we feel like we had our shot, we missed it, and now we're feeling a little bit lost. And I'm curious, like in that kind of rock bottom phase, was there anything in particular that just helped you get the ball rolling a little bit? Maybe it was exercise. Maybe it was getting crystal clear on some goals for the month. Like, what was that one little step that helped you get a little bit of positive momentum going in the right
Yeah.
direction?
Well, I think the first thing is that we can't shame whatever our rock bottom looks like. We can't be sadder than sad. We can't be more rock bottom than rock bottom.
Right.
And it's easy to sometimes look at others and be like, oh, well, look at the people in this country, or, my neighbor went through this and my situation's not nearly as bad. But our emotions calibrate to the situations that we're in. And so rock bottom for us is rock bottom for us. And pointing at others and being like, well, it's not that bad, or, I should be feeling better than this, only serves to make it worse. So I think we've got to kind of acknowledge that, hey, we are going through some tough times, and maybe people have had it better, maybe they've had it worse, but this is where I am. And here's the difficult emotions and resistance that's holding me back. And that's what I'm going to deal with. So once I started to get my hands around that, what was a huge help to me was accountability. Like, to me, it wasn't really about trust. I didn't understand kind of the more profundity of the trust I was building in myself. What it was is I needed accountability to get out of bed in the morning, to make the phone calls that I didn't really want to make, to go to the gym. And I actually found that accountability in somebody that felt relatively safe to me at the time and still does. It's my sister, my business partner. I wouldn't be doing this stuff without her, but I remember asking her, like, hey, can you just call and check in and make sure that I'm out of bed at 7 o'clock tomorrow? Or can we talk at the end of today and let's just make sure that I went to the gym? And, now having done a little bit of research on it, when we've got external accountability, we're not 70, 80, or 90% more likely to achieve your goals. We're 95% more likely to achieve our goals. And by the way, as a team, it's even better. We're 4 times as likely to achieve the goals. And what I've found now working with a lot of high-level entrepreneurs is they're already high performing. Many of us are already performing pretty well. We've got a house, maybe a successful business at some level. We're running a team somewhat successfully, or maybe very successfully. And it's easy to kind of put accountability to the wayside and be like, oh, we're performing pretty well. I don't need that, because it doesn't feel good. But I can promise you, from that rock bottom moment of my experience and from all sorts of research and work that I've done, that no matter what level we're at, if we're reaching for that next level, we're looking to grow in any meaningful ways, we need that external accountability to help us get there.
I love that. What a great actionable tip for anyone that's feeling a little bit stuck, a little bit lost, a little bit rock bottomy, right? Find someone that you're comfortable with. Maybe it's your
Yeah.
partner, maybe it's your sister, maybe it's your father, and just tell them a few things that you're looking to do on a daily basis, whether it's wake up at 7, go to the gym, make a couple phone calls, because the value of human accountability is really, it's remarkable. I mean, if we have someone that we respect, that we know, perhaps we love them, and we tell them that we're going to do something, we're
Yeah.
just so much more likely to follow through on it. I know for myself, sometimes I'll send if I have an especially ambitious day, I'll take
Mm,
a screenshot of my calendar. I'll send it to my partner the night beforehand, and I'll say, hey, listen, hold me to this day. Like, this is what
yeah.
I want to get done tomorrow, time blocked out, whatever it is, work on content 9 to 10, 10 to 11 calls, whatever it is. Hold me accountable to this day.
Nice.
And when I do that, I really just get a lot more done. I mean, maybe I'm not perfect, but boy, I'm a lot closer to perfect than I would be if I just kept it internal. And one more thing that as far as personal experience within the accountability, topic, is I think that forming a mastermind with a few other entrepreneurs or similar
Mhm.
people that are in a similar mindset as yourself, and meeting on a monthly basis. It's something that I started about 6 months ago, and it's been invaluable. I mean, we really hold each other accountable to pushing the ball forward, taking action on the important projects in our lives. And I can say for a fact, none of us would be actually taking as much action on these projects that we are if we had not been meeting on a monthly basis, setting a few objectives that we want each other to hold each other accountable to. So human accountability, boy, it really is kind of the missing ingredient, I think, for a lot of people.
Especially at the higher performing levels. And it goes back to what I said, like, it just doesn't feel good. And let me ask you, like, with your partner or the mastermind you're a part of, if you don't do what you said you were going to do, what happens?
Yeah, you feel like a schmo. You really
Yeah.
do. You know, you don't feel good. You kind of lurch into that meeting, you know,
Yeah.
and your shoulders are slumped because you know the two people across the table probably did everything they aim to do because they're absolute killers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been there, and I gotta say, it doesn't feel good. So it definitely inspires you to want to do it the next time.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to it, right? Is our accountability has to exist at a higher level than our discomfort. If the accountability doesn't feel kind of negative, if it doesn't feel kind of hard, just like you described, it won't do us any good. So some people use like a journal for accountability, and great. But unless you're the kind of person that comes back to that journal and really feels that pit of despair a little bit when you haven't done it, it's not strong enough for you. And so I always look for like the bigger goal that I have, the bigger threshold that I'm setting for myself will require greater levels of accountability. So if I want to do something really big, I might post it online and tell everybody and tell a couple specifically, like this day, this time, this is the deliverable, hold me to it and don't let me off the hook. Not one of these like, oh, good job, Sterling, try again next time, but like dig in with me and let's sort this thing out.
I love the online like public self challenges. I personally can't say
Yeah.
I've done one yet, but I've witnessed some people do that. Sometimes they set revenue goals for themselves and they kind of keep their followers updated along the way, or maybe it's
Yeah.
more of a process oriented goal that they're trying to achieve. But I think it certainly takes some courage. It takes some guts, but certainly I've seen it to be very effective.
Yeah. I just saw it myself. I do a lot of adventure activities. And so this might be chalked up in the bucket of crazy for many people. But for me, it felt like a good thing to do, which for my sister's birthday, she was turning 32 years old. So we decided we were going to walk 32 miles carrying 32 pounds. And it was going to take us about 12 hours. And the first thing I did, first couple miles, as soon as the light comes up, because we started at like 5 a.m. or something, is I posted it online, right? Like I locked myself in and I said, this is what I'm doing today. And sure enough, like it's almost predictable. Come 5 p.m. or so, 4 p.m. or so, I'm ready to throw in the towel. I'm like, this weight vest feels terrible. My shoulders are all bruised. My legs don't feel like they work anymore. I feel like I'm falling apart. And it was that commitment that I posted online that kind of pulled me through. Now, here's the best part of doing some of those physical things is we've all felt physical discomfort, right? Like you stub your toe, or if you're crazy, you do a weight vest ultra marathon. And we've all felt emotional discomfort. You know, maybe you lose a deal or a difficult conversation with somebody that's close to you. Physical, mental, emotional. The brain and body of all of us as human beings processes that discomfort. We work with that stuff almost identically. So much so we can take acetaminophen and it will help you with emotional pain. Now, all the disclaimers about that, I'm not a doctor. That's not the latest TikTok trend. Like, I don't suggest you do that. But what I
Sure.
do suggest is we take that next step, which is if where we meet discomfort anywhere translates into our capacity to deal with it everywhere. It's a muscle we can build. So as we practice that process of going through discomfort, of growth goals in any domain of life, and having that accountability as a tool to move us through it, the better we get at that stuff everywhere. It's holistic in nature.
32 pounds, 32 miles on the 32nd birthday. It sounds like you and your sister have a pretty special relationship.
It was really special. We're both looking at each other like halfway through, like, what are we doing?
That
But you
is
get done
wild.
with these things and you're like, that was epic. I'm so glad we did that.
That is wild. I mean, my 2-year-old weighs a little more than 32 pounds, and some days it feels like I carry him 32 miles, but I'm sure I'm not
Yeah.
actually quite there. So I
Yeah.
could only imagine what 32 miles with a toddler basically strapped to your back would feel like. I give you guys credit. Curious, how long did that take? What was the extent of that journey?
So it was 13 hours all in. We took about 60 minutes a break. So it was about 12 hours. We were moving pretty quickly. Honestly, we probably could have taken a couple more breaks than we did. But she and I, especially, we get into this point where we're just like, just let's just push through. Let's
Let's
just
go.
finish this thing. And so that's what we did.
That's wild. I can't imagine the conversation is scintillating for the entire 13 hours while carrying 32 pounds. There has to be some periods of just silence and just grit in there.
There is. And honestly, that's what I like most about doing these adventures. And I've done a bunch of things, trek the Sahara, cycle across the Rocky Mountains, different kinds of ultra marathons. I did 29 Everesting, if you're familiar with that one, where you climb a local mountain until you reach the height of Everest, which is about 29,000 feet.
Cool. Very cool. I'm only familiar with it from researching you for the interview, but it sounded pretty wild.
It is wild, and it's a fantastic event. I recommend it if you're into some of those crazy things. But what I like about these things is not the crazy thing itself, and it's cool to talk about. But also, that's not my favorite thing. What I love about them is going through discomfort together builds connections and community like nothing else. That's one of the reasons I am so close with my sisters, because we've been through so many of these difficult things together. And all of the activities that I've done, I come back and I said, like, I know those people better and I feel like they know me. There's something about going through the unknown and uncomfortable in really physically profound ways that allows us to kind of drop some of those shields that we have on a daily basis and really connect in an authentic way, typically pretty quickly. It's, like I said, it's my favorite.
I totally agree with that. I never summited Mount Kilimanjaro, but I did pledge a fraternity, and I can
All
say,
right, there we go.
and I can say that just going through that, what feels like hell at the time, just being a 24/7 servant for an entire semester of college, and getting the 3 a.m. phone call to go get McDonald's for a brother, or mopping the floors of the basement, or getting screamed at in the basement, and having to do push-ups and sweat, flowing down your face, it does bond you with people in a way that almost nothing else can. And I got to say, I'm pretty much very close friends with almost everyone in that pledge class. And I think you're right. A big reason for that is because of the hell that we went through together.
There's no question. I mean, there's two things that bond people, and that's time. Like spending really long time with people will bond people, and it's also trauma, or said another way, going through difficult things. And it becomes, this is probably a bad word to use in today's time, but it's like infectious. Like it's contagious with the people around us. So when we're going through it, other people start to kind of look at it and be like, oh, I want to be part of that, which in a large part is what keeps the fraternity going, I would imagine, right? Like, I want to be part of this tight-knit group of people. And I didn't even know it at the time. I just started going through some of these things myself, and then my sister, and then we had friends talking. And then all of a sudden we've got hundreds of thousands of people all around the world, all committed to really big goals, personal goals, professional goals, and going through the discomfort necessary to achieve them. And it's become this incredible bond, this movement of people that kind of grab some of that fire and inspiration for themselves and bring it into their own communities and teams and companies. And I don't know, I started this whole thing to dig myself out of that hole, that low point after that low company. And I realized it's actually not about me at all. It's about supporting others to get through the unknown and the uncomfortable. And I don't know, it feels a little bit like a calling, like it's what my life is about.
So let's talk a little bit about, hunting discomfort, right? That's the name of your best-selling book. And I think that, maybe for a lot of us, and we're not so used to seeking out discomfort, and we avoid discomfort at almost every turn, and we're not ready to go, summit Mount Everest. What are some, like, tactical day-to-day ways that we can just kind of get started in this whole hunting discomfort?
Yeah. So what's funny, Brett, is almost always when people see that book title, Hunting Discomfort, the
Great book
first,
title, by the way. I mean,
thank
that
you.
is, when I saw that, I was like, damn, I wish I thought of that. That's fire.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, well, it was funny because it can be very triggering to people. Like, some
Sure.
people have your reaction. They're like, I love it. Get me after that. Like, I got to dig into this. And other people are like, look at my bank account, look at my business, look at my team, look at my performance, look at my family. I don't need to hunt discomfort, Sterling. I'm surrounded by
Right. I'm good. I've
it.
got plenty.
And I get it. Like, look at the world today. We've got economic uncertainty. We've got political chaos. Let's just call it that. Global instability. We're surrounded by rapid, relentless, and accelerating change that's throwing us all into these uncomfortable situations, whether we like it or not. And so when it comes to hunting discomfort, like, what are you, crazy? Why do I need to do that? But what we don't realize is that we're actually living with discomfort. We're placating the reasons we have it. We're rationalizing all these uncomfortable things we live with day in and day out for years and sometimes decades. We're not hunting discomfort. We're living with it. And when we can really start to turn towards some of those uncomfortable things, the conversations, the relationships, the activities, the goals, whatever they are, and start to pursue those things, get to the source of those things, make progress through some of those things, it leaves ourselves, somewhat ironically, given the book title, free from discomfort. I don't advocate living an uncomfortable life. I advocate living a free life. It just turns out that discomfort is our pathway to get there.
I love it. I
Um,
love it. So what do I do I have to buy a cold plunge? Is that what I got to do, Sterling? Is that
yeah,
is
yeah.
that step one? I just got to go jump in a cold pool.
Also, the infrared sauna, right?
Like what is like is it like for myself? I know like I actually have like a habit app, and I try and keep track of doing at least one thing that scares me every single day. And
Nice.
sometimes that's just speaking up in a meeting where I don't really
Totally.
feel like I totally have a lot to say, or maybe it's giving a genuine compliment to a stranger, or maybe it's jumping out of an airplane. Who the hell knows what day it is? But I try and
Yeah.
do something, at least when I feel fear once a day. I try and move through that fear. Um,
Yeah.
is that a good way to kind of get started on this journey of seeking discomfort? Is just kind of look for that fear in our day and just make it a habit of stepping towards it once in a while?
Totally. Even in small ways. And I was just out in Chicago the other day speaking at this event, and somebody raised their hand and said, I don't really have anything to say. I'm just raising my hand because I was really uncomfortable to do it.
Love
And I
that.
wanted to take a small step right now. And I'm like, yes, like that is exactly it.
Good
You
stuff.
don't you don't have to shoot for the moon. You don't have to climb Everest or Kilimanjaro. You don't have to jump out of an airplane. You don't even have to cold plunge. But what we do need to do is take even incrementally small steps. I think about it as like microdosing discomfort,
Now let's go.
because right, like, and we get stronger every single time we do that. And so I do something similar to you, is every day I commit to doing at least one thing. Now, that commitment sometimes is the uncomfortable part. Like, oh, I'm on vacation today. I don't want to commit to anything.
Sure.
And sometimes it's the execution of, oh, I'm really busy and I committed to call my mom today, but I've got to do it no matter what. And as I do this day after day, as you do it day after day, as anybody does it day after day, what we're unconsciously doing is building a trust, a belief in ourselves that we can do those kinds of things. So as the world continues to change and we get thrown into more and more chaotic and uncomfortable situations, it actually doesn't matter what they are, because we've built this trust, this belief in ourselves that we can handle it regardless.
I love that. And I challenge everyone out there who's listening, for the next 7 days, find something once a day that maybe isn't so comfortable and move
Yeah.
towards that discomfort. And I bet after a week, only 1 week is done of that process, you will just feel more confident in your ability to take on life's challenges and to accomplish what you're looking to accomplish in your life, which kind of makes me think about what's written right behind your head right there, right? No matter what, which is your
Right.
that is like the Sterling Hawkins battle cry. And I really, really love it. And, to
Thanks.
me, it's kind of like it's that mission in our lives that we're committed to, no matter what. And but I think some people listening might be like, I don't know what that mission is for myself. For someone
Yeah.
like that who's really kind of struggling with finding their mission, how do they find their no matter what?
Yeah. I could get on a soapbox about this all day. So
Let's go.
so
That's what we're here for.
cut me off whenever you like. But I think purpose, our why, has oftentimes become overly intellectualized. Like, well, let me take this quiz and figure out my purpose.
Sure.
Like, I'm going to answer 5 or 10 questions or get on a call for an hour with somebody, and I'm going to discover the meaning of my life. That's not where it lives. Purpose isn't in the mind, or no matter what our life is about doesn't exist in the intellect. It exists in our heart. And what we have to do if we're starting to look for it is step out of our mind. Said another way, we've got to get into uncomfortable situations. To me, the bigger the better, right? Like, microdosing it, fantastic. But if you want to move, do something really, really, really uncomfortable, and it will start to shift you. It'll change you. It'll get you out of your head and into your heart. And over time, and it does take time, it's not like, oh, I've got an answer immediately. We can start to shed some of that discomfort that's been holding us back. And that purpose, it's not like we find it. It's not like we arrive at it. It's same as what we were talking about with trust. We remember it. We start to remember what's inside of us that's most important and reconnect with that. And that becomes the fuel to take us further.
I like that a lot. So it's not necessarily about sitting there with like a pen and
No,
paper and journaling your way to your no matter what to your mission in life. It's about putting you in those circumstances, in those adventures
totally.
that bring you discomforts, and that is where you'll start living through your heart more than your head, and you'll find it. You'll find it in those moments.
Yeah.
Maybe you're scared of public speaking. Go sign up for a storytelling class. Maybe you're scared of taking on a really challenging physical endeavor. Go sign up for a 5K that kind of holds you accountable to training for something, whatever it is, whatever is going to cause you some
Yes.
discomfort. Take steps towards that on a regular basis, and you'll just organically find your way towards that mission.
Yeah. And I would say I'm a good example of that, right? Like, I thought I had life figured out, being part of this unicorn of a startup. I clearly thought I was the next Steve Jobs. And I'm like, oh, only a matter of time until I buy a private jet and my island and, all the things. And so it was super humbling when all of that came falling apart. And my identity, what I believe my purpose, my life was about, all came crumbling down because it was attached to the company. It wasn't attached to myself. And I think I was always shy, Brett. But for me, after this company collapsed, speaking in public, being truly seen was my greatest fear by a long shot. I always like that Seinfeld joke. I'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy.
Right.
Any day of the week, like, put me in the coffin. I don't even want to give a toast at dinner. Like, I can't possibly do it. Like I was saying before, it felt like I had my shot and I was too ashamed to show up anywhere and share anything otherwise. And when that quote came to me, it was actually something my mom said growing up. Goes all the way back to Robert Frost, if you want the origin of it. The way out is through. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start going through some of these things. And number one on the list for me was speaking in public. And long, kind of dramatic story short, I end up speaking at this conference in Singapore. I talked this poor conference director into being not like a breakout speaker, but the keynote speaker of his entire event. They fly me over there and I blacked out. I was more nervous than nervous. I don't remember giving the talk at all. I remember, like, Singapore's already hot and humid,
Sure.
and the nerves on top of that. It's a good thing I was wearing a jacket because I was soaking wet. I was so nervous. But I did it. And I get through this thing, and the conference director, there's no way he was in the talk that I gave, but gave me all sorts of accolades and put me in touch with all of his conference director friends. And I was like, you know what? My mom is right. The way out is through. And I started to discover that the thing that literally scared me most in life, the thing that I wanted to avoid and deny, and when it would happen, just like survive and batten down the hatches and just kind of barrel my way through it. It was actually in that pain that my purpose started to emerge. And it has become one of my favorite things in the world to do. Never would have guessed that 10, 15 years ago. It
So
was
you were
only by going through the pain that it started to become clear.
Kind of curious how you got the ball rolling through that pain, though, right? Because I know you wind up
Yeah.
as the keynote for this conference, and of course, you've spoken in front of thousands and thousands of people since. And it all
Yeah.
started with a fear of public speaking. Like, what was the micro step you took towards that fear? What was it? Toastmasters? Was it speaking at schools? Like, what did your voyage to keynote speaker look like?
Yeah. Well, I shot big, like I recommend for people to do. Like when you're really ready for a massive performance gain, go after the most discomfort that you possibly can. And so I didn't understand the psychology and philosophy and everything behind it. This was kind of like an intuitive move for me. Like I've
Sure.
got nothing to lose here.
Right. Let's do it. I'm hanging out in mom's kitchen right now. Like
Seriously.
let's go give some speeches, baby.
Yeah. Well, it started because I got this junk mail from a conference in Singapore. Junk mail, like we all get thousands of a day, probably
Sure.
saying, "Hey, join our conference." And I literally hit the reply button. I said, "Why don't you have me speak? Best Sterling."
Cool. Very cool.
And I somehow talked this guy into um, being the keynote speaker of his event. It didn't really become clear to me what I was doing until he sent me the legal agreement. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know what to say. I feel like a tremendous fraud and failure, and I'm terrified to do it. Like it's like the reality of it started to descend on me.
Sure.
But I was committed. I locked myself in, you could say, no matter what. And once I had that big goal on the horizon, I did exactly what you said. I started looking up local Toastmasters clubs. If I ever went out to dinner, I'd say, let me say a few words, like every single scenario, because I had this massive goal on the horizon. I'm like, that's going to be way harder than this. So I'm going to take some small steps towards it now. And so I just started getting after it. But it was that big goal, that commitment, which I was, by the way, held accountable for, that started to draw me through some of those smaller steps.
So cool. I've had on a lot of, sought after speakers on the show, and I got to say
Yeah.
none of them really started that way by booking themselves as the keynote for a conference. Step one, usually it's
Yeah.
I spoke at some schools, I did some Toastmasters, I gave a few best man speeches, and I worked my way up. No, I'm just going to go be the keynote at a Singapore conference, and I'll figure it out on the way there.
Yeah. Well, and to me, like I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but now I recognize, like, by jumping in the deep end, that's a fantastic way to learn, right? Like it's monstrously uncomfortable. It's very, very, very humbling, but it will improve your performance at a rate that is much dramatically faster than any other way, right? Like by having that commitment, by keynote speaking at that conference in Singapore, like all of a sudden I've got to level up my game in a way that almost feels impossible. And so I had to eschew some of these kind of traditional approaches of, oh, well, I'm going to start out giving a couple of dinner speeches and then I'm going to work my way up a little bit at a time. I'm like, I've got the top of the mountain right here. It's coming up in 6 months.
Right.
And so I better transform myself in that 6 months to get there.
Very cool. Very cool, man. Okay, so let's say we've kind of gone through the discomfort, and we found our no matter what. We know what our life's mission is in
Yeah.
crystal clear detail. How do we actually achieve it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two different kinds of no matter what's, first of all. And I think we can think about this as like a lowercase no matter what and a capitalized no
Nice.
matter what.
Hit me with it.
The lowercase no matter what's are finite commitments, specific things that happen at specific times that either happen or don't happen. This could be hitting a revenue goal. It could be opening up a certain number of locations, or, something that happens in the finite world. It happens or it doesn't happen. We need those as no matter what. We've got to work through those things. But I think oftentimes we get totally preoccupied by those things. And that's what our life becomes about. That's what I got sucked into. We raised $500 million and we've got models in the office and parties at the Four Seasons, and we're, crushing it in all these ways. All the finite must be my purpose. And it's wrong. What's most important to human beings by research and philosophy. I don't know if you've ever read any Paul Tillich, German-American theologian and philosopher. The most important things to us are the infinite things, things like love, joy, gratitude, peace. Those are like our true no matter what. That's the capital no matter what. And I think that's where our true purpose ultimately lives. Like those things, those infinite things that no matter what happens in the world can never be taken away from us. Those are most important. And I think as we start to connect with that, we have a vision for our lives and our business and where we want to go. The real work becomes making the formerly uncomfortable comfortable. That means bringing the infinite into the finite, the gratitude into those missed sales goals, the love into a difficult conversation, the peace into a moment that feels chaotic. And as we do that, I call it the real work, the human work, to bring those infinite things in the moments of uncertainty and the moments of discomfort. It transforms everything standing in our way. So we need the goals, we need the finite, we need those benchmarks of growth, but we also need to stay connected to those things that are most important to us and bring it into the hardest times. Did I answer your question, or did I just
Yeah.
go off on a tangent?
No, no, absolutely you did, 100%. And it kind of makes me think a little bit about another one of your topics and things I've heard you speak on.
Mm,
We've already talked about trust a little bit, but
yeah,
we haven't talked a ton about leadership. And I'm
yeah,
curious, what is trust driven leadership?
yeah. Well, trust to me, I define a little bit differently than maybe most, which is this courageous act. And I really mean as a courageous act, not like superficially courageous, but deeply courageous to see possibility in the unknown. That's where kind of the human default is to look at the unknown with fear and skepticism and turn back and hang on to all the habits and approaches and beliefs from the past. But trust is this courage to see possibility in that. And leadership to me is seeding, growing, and sharing that trust in ourselves and those around us. As we take steps forward in the face of the unknown and the uncomfortable, we embrace that fear ahead, and we admit our vulnerability in it by saying, well, I don't know, or I made a mistake, or this was a failure. That starts to share that capacity with those around us. And I don't really care what's on your business card, but doing that makes you a leader no matter where you fall in an organization, at least in my book.
I love that. I love that. Curious, what's your average day look like right now, Sterling?
I wish I had an average day.
is, is there any continuity, or is it just different every single day?
No, so I wake up, and what's most important to me is a little period of reflection,
Okay,
right? Maybe similar to you, like what do I want this day to be about? And I want to connect with the gratitude and love and joy that I want to bring forward in my life.
sure.
I
Is
try to
that
get some.
is that like journaling? Is that a walk? Is that just you kind of sitting in quiet contemplation with a cup of coffee?
It depends how I'm feeling that day. Typically, it's me sitting on the edge of the bed because I don't know how you are, but like I've got to physically get out of the bed or I'll just fall asleep.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
So I get out of the bed and I'll just take sometimes just a couple of minutes and think on it. I might write it down. I might go for a walk, depending on kind of the space that I'm in, but I'll have some kind of feeling when I wake up. And that'll give me some sense of, well, like how much time do I need to kind of recenter myself before I start the day? Then I like to get some physical movement in. And then from there, it could be speaking at a conference. It could be getting on an airplane. It could be some adventure like hiking 32 miles or some nonsense like that. Or it could be having conversations with, really cool and smart people like yourself, sharing important messages.
Very
Um,
cool. Very
but the
cool.
core of it is sharing this philosophy that we're talking about, right? The discomfort in our lives is not something to avoid. It is literally a biohack to being better, faster, and smarter. Research out of Yale shows that we'll learn up to 4 times faster when we're uncomfortable. And so, how do we build the trust in ourselves, our communities, our organizations, our team, even our families to be able to go through those uncomfortable things, no matter what they are?
I'll tell you what though, and I know it's not necessarily like the 7-step morning routine that you hear some gurus talk about, right? You got to journal, you got to meditate, you got to cold plunge, you got to whatever.
No, I
I,
don't.
I I think just even just sitting at the foot of your bed, taking a moment to really kind of set some intentions for your day is a powerful act that a lot of people don't do, right? You're leveraging those alpha brain waves at that point, which are a very powerful way to speak to your subconscious mind. Take a
Yep.
couple minutes, sit on the foot of your bed, set some intentions for your day before you look at your phone and you start doom scrolling through Instagram reels. I mean, that right there, I think that one little tweak could probably make a big difference for a lot of people.
I think so. And honestly, this might get me canceled in some places.
Not here, baby. Not on Persistence
But,
Playbook.
but like that morning routine, I'm all for it. I'm not denying that it can be really helpful for people, but sometimes it just becomes a limiting circumstance of like, oh, well, I didn't have enough time to do my morning routine. Therefore, I can't produce X, Y, and Z. Right? Like it becomes another reason or excuse to get out of doing what you're going to do. There are days when I don't have a chance to reflect. You know, maybe I didn't hear my alarm go off, or I'm
Sure.
running behind for whatever reason. And well, I do try to do it every single day. Like I'm committed to doing it. There are days when I don't. And I make sure that I'm not so attached to that morning routine that it doesn't become an escape valve to get done what I need to get done.
Right. I agree with that. Like if I didn't get my cold plunge and my sauna done with my 15 minutes of meditation, then I'm worthless today. I'm just going to go watch Netflix.
Yeah, like by all means do it, but don't use it as another excuse. It's nonsense.
I,
It's
I agree.
that's only serving to hold you back.
I agree. And honestly, for myself, I know my most productive days are the days where I probably get to work sooner than later, right? And maybe I'll get my workout in the morning, maybe I'll get it in at lunch, but like
Yeah,
I don't force myself to do a million things before I get to work. Because if I try and meditate and I try and journal and I try and work out and I try and go for a hike before I work out, next thing you know, it's like 11:30 a.m. It's almost lunchtime and I haven't done a damn thing. So I think that
right.
a lot of high performers I've talked to on the show get to work earlier in their day than later. And sure, maybe they squeeze in the journaling and the meditation and the workout, but they make sure they carve out that 3 to 4 hours of deep work time. And a lot of times I
Yeah,
found it is in the morning because, once the afternoon comes and the bullets start flying, it's tough to turn those notifications off. It's tough to sit at that computer and do some really good, deep work. So I definitely, I hear what you're saying there. And here's a
yeah,
question that
yeah,
I like to end on a lot of the time. This is Persistence Playbook. We like to talk about defeating the resistance, that laziness that creeps up once in a while. Maybe it's that self-doubt. Do you ever feel resistance to the important work that you should be doing? And if so, what do you do or what do you say internally to get yourself to take action?
yeah. This is going to be like a summary of a lot of our conversation, which I can't believe we're coming to a close already. But what I tell myself is no matter what didn't start as some rally cry. It was a personal mantra transparently to get myself out of bed in the morning. Like it wasn't some huge, like, oh, no matter what, I'm going to conquer the day. It was like, I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow, no matter what situation I have to face. And so it is still a personal mantra today. And any resistance I feel to me is a firm indication of a lack of trust. Resistance will not be there when we firmly believe, we've got faith, we've got trust that what we're doing is worth it, that we can achieve it, that we will reach those things that are most important to us. So, I cultivate that trust as best I can, but when it comes down to it, it's just no matter what, I'm doing it.
Sterling, that's powerful stuff, man. I'm fired up right now. Thank you for
Let's
being with
go.
us. Thank you for being with us today, brother. Where can everyone keep up with what you got going on?
Honor to join you. Yeah, usually our website's the best place to find everything and everything. SterlingHawkins.com, all the social medias there, and bringing us full circle. You can Google Sterling Hawkins, and there's actually a couple of us out there, but I'm fairly searchable.
No way. There's another Sterling Hawkins out there.
There's three of them, I can tell you.
I feel sorry for those guys. Because they've got to compete with the no matter what movement. Good luck.
That's right.
Good luck with that. Getting to the top of those SEO charts. Thank you for being with us today, Sterling. Thank you for being out there with us, Persistence Playbook Nation. And this is your weekly reminder that you will feel resistance to the important work that you know you should be doing this week. In those moments, confront that resistance, lean into it, lean into your why. Remember your mantra. Maybe it's no matter what, and take action anyway. We'll see you next week.